Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're concluding our study of the resurrection, our own resurrection, by looking at the book of Revelation. And we're going to look in chapter 1 today. And the next time we'll look at the final judgment scene and what happens immediately afterwards in chapters 20 and 21. Revelation 1 is really about what Jesus looks like at this point. And I wanted us to turn there because I want us to see that Jesus himself has a resurrection body. It is a glorified resurrection body. Paul has told us in 1 Corinthians 15 quite clearly that we're going to have resurrection bodies that are going to be eternal. They're going to be indestructible. They're going to be glorious. That what we have now is just the seed of what we will be. And what we will be physical. I mean, it will have a permanence and an indestructibility, but it will be something concrete. It will be a body itself. And he told us, Paul has also already told us in Galatians chapter 2, verse 8, that Jesus himself continues to have a body, that all that is God is currently contained in the body of Jesus. So anyway, I wanted us to look at that glorified body in Revelation chapter 1. Revelation chapter 1, written by the Apostle John at the end of the first century in the 90s, 93, 95, something like that. He's on the island of Patmos. The island of Patmos is a prison island. It's where people are sent to be quarry slaves, where they're going to be worked to death. He's in his 90s, and he's not dead yet. And he receives this revelation from God, this vision of heaven and the unfolding of what will shortly come to pass. He's not seeing the unfolding of all human history, but what concerns his readers, his immediate readers. And then he gets a vision of the final judgment. Not the first one to do so. Isaiah has a vision of the final judgment, but his is pertinent to us as Christians because it tells us some things that we can comprehend a little better with the 2020 hindsight that we have. But I wanted us to begin in chapter 1, and I wanted us to look at Jesus as John meets him in chapter 1. It says in chapter 1, verse 9, um, I, John, your brother and fellow partaker in tribulation and kingdom and perseverance which are in Jesus, was on the island called Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like the sound of a trumpet saying, Write in a book what you see, and send it to the seven churches, to Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and having turned, I saw seven golden lampstands. These would be menorahs, like he would have known growing up as a Jew. And in the middle of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed in a robe reaching to the feet, girded across his breast with a golden girdle. And his head and his hair were white like wool, like snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire, and his feet were like burnished bronze, when it has been caused to glow in a furnace. And his voice was like the sound of many waters. And in his right hand he held seven stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp two-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in its strength. And when I saw him, I fell down at his feet as a dead man. And he laid his right hand upon me, saying, Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. This is clearly a vision of Jesus in his glorified state in heaven. It has such an effect on John that he falls down dead, and Jesus lays his hand on him and raises him. Whether this happened in the vision or happened to him physically, um, it was something he clearly experienced in a palpable way. Um, I there's a lot going on here. I just wanted us to notice the way he strains at language to describe Jesus. Now we are mixing metaphor and an attempt at actual description because he talks about a double-edged sword coming out of his mouth, and we know that the sword is the word of God. The word of God is sharper than a double-edged sword. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12. Sword of the Spirit is the word of God. Ephesians chapter 6. So we know that that's metaphor, that Jesus doesn't actually have a sword sticking out of his mouth. But the rest, we see a recognizable body. It was like a human body, one like a son of man. It doesn't say it was a son of man, human. It doesn't say it was a human. It looked like it was like a human body. He had a head. He had shoulders. He had a chest. He had legs. He had arms. He had hands. He had a mouth. He had a face. It was like a human body, but it was glorified. And the best he can come up with is different ways to describe glowing and radiating light, which is how he describes the glorified state of Jesus. Now, this is Jesus in his glorified resurrection body. The Apostle Paul in Philippians 2 talks about Jesus when he gets back to heaven after his sacrifice, being given a name higher than any name and being glorified. Jesus' resurrection body is glorified in a way ours will not be, because we're not him. But we see that even with Jesus, the body is recognizable as a human body. It's just a glorified, permanent, eternal body. And it tells us that Jesus himself, when he emptied himself and came to earth to become us, to sacrifice for us, was permanently altered because he has a body still, even in heaven, as we will have a body in heaven. Okay. That's what I wanted to say about that, not to quote Forrest Gump or anything. We're going to look at Revelation chapters 20 and 21 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.